Had some pretty good times, and I brought my daughter along, Gussie, and she wants to tell y'all a bit right now.
I was laid to rest here on August the 10th, 1916. My name was Gussie Maxwell Jackson, and I was born at what is now the Whitehall community, but back then it was Old Jones community. And that's my father, Bynum, and Ida Toole was my mother. I was raised with 8 brothers and sisters. I was born somewhere in the middle. We had some really good times, though. I remember we used to have to walk to school, and you know, we didn't have a lot. It took a while for Papa to get everything all built up. But so what we would do, we would put on our old shoes and walk part of the way to school. But there was this creek with a bridge kind of close to there. So we would take our old shoes off and put them at the creek under the bridge, and we'd put our new shoes on to walk the rest of the way to school. Well, one day it started to rain while we were at school, and when we got back, we saw our shoes floating down the creek, and so we had to run and go get our shoes. And so we all come in and was telling Mama and Papa about it, and they thought that was pretty funny. But when I got older, I attended the State Agricultural School, which y'all would know better as UAM, and I had a lot of fun out there. I did a lot, participated in many activities, and I eventually met Joe Jackson, to whom I married in April of 1914. I was 24 years old, and he was 26. He was a logger, and he moved me to Boydell, which is down below Dermot. And we had a lot of good times down there. Most of the time it was Joe that was responsible for the hunting or growing or whatever, however it was we fishing to get our food and everything. But every once in a while, I would go to the store to buy a coon. Well, let me tell you, we had some guidelines about buying a coon because you had to be very careful. They had, the hunters or trappers or whatever were supposed to leave one paw on this animal so that you could be certain you were getting a coon and not a dog. I know, as bad as that sounds, it did happen from time to time. So we always checked that paw to make sure we were getting a coon. But that was one of my favorite things. I loved making coon supper and a little poke salad to go along with it. We usually had kind of a folk doctor in the community, you know, wanted to use a lot of home remedies to cure us and all that. But I had a son when I was 25, and we named him Earl. But after Earl was born, I just never did feel very good afterwards. And then when he was about a year old, I really got down. And no, all the home remedies, everything they tried, nothing worked. And I just didn't feel good, and they were real concerned about me for a long time there. And but then after a while, I kind of got better. And I started doing around more. I was able to do more of the cooking and the washing and the cleaning, and I was able to take care of Earl again. And you know, everybody thought, oh well, Gussie's gonna be all right. You know, there's no need for concern. And maybe I overdid it. I don't know. But one morning, after I had been, you know, doing all the washing and the cooking and everything, I laid down on the bed to rest a little bit, and Joe called my name, asked me a simple question, but I never responded. When he came to my bedside, he found that I had passed away due to heart failure. I was 26 years old. I left behind a 1-year-old son and my husband Joe. I understand that Earl, Minnie, which was Joe's sister, she took Earl and took care of him for a little while, but eventually he went and lived with Papa and Miss Emma, and they raised him with the 6 children that they had together. He grew up to be a fine young man. He entered the service and he got married, and he, when he got out of the service, he went down to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and he worked at the blind school down there. Of course, Earl, he eventually died too, and he's buried with his wife down there. But pleasure to introduce you to the most fascinating people that are out here today. It's Miss Martha Edwards and her daughter. She's up here with her daughter, so if y'all would, just move on around.
Come on over this this way. Come on over. Gather around me over here. I want to tell you about my life and why I am buried here at Rough and Ready, why my bones rest here at Rough and Ready at this time. That was James Tracy Sanderlin, and my mother was Olive Barbara Sanderlin. And I was the 5th child of 9 children. Now, back when I was growing up, I was born in 1855, slavery was in full favor in Georgia. Everybody had slavery, but you know, I don't know where we had slaves or not. There were 2 people who lived in our yard, in a little house in our yard, Old Aunt Kate, as I called her. I never did think of her as a slave. She just worked there for a mall and did these things, and Uncle Ben helped Paul, and after the war was over, they were still there. But I'm sure Paul would have liked some more slaves if he could have afforded them. And in fact, 2 of his sons, John and Lemuel, were fighting in the war between the states. Well, we just went along. I grew up in this community, and I learned what other kids, young girls did at that time during the Civil War. I learned to sew and cook and make soap and make candles. It was always something to do back in those days, and I kept busy. And I was very good at all these things. In fact, when I was 10 years old, I cooked dinner for the whole family, the noon meal. Well, I went to school also. I got to go to school. There was an academy at Cotton Hill, and I walked to school. And you know, I was a very apt pupil. Oh, I just was the best speller in the school, and there was nobody that could parse a sentence better than I could. Sometimes the professor would say, "Miss Martha, come here and parse that sentence for those boys," and those boys would be studying Greek and Latin, and I knew how to parse a sentence better than they did. Well, time went on, and it's 1865, and one night Paul had us all out on the back porch shelling peanuts, because next day to plant peanuts you have to shell them. And he had us shelling peanuts, and the next, that night while we were out on the back porch late in the afternoon, someone yelled at our gate, "Anybody home?" Now back in those days, everybody had a fence because there were no stock laws. The cows and the horses and pigs all ran outside, and you had to have a fence to protect yourself. Well, always people went up to your gate and say, "Anybody home?" No one just came into your yard because the dogs might get you. So you yelled at the gate, "Anybody home?" And that night, while we were shelling peanuts, late that afternoon, someone yelled, "Anybody home?" And Papa jumped up and he said, "That's John." My oldest brother had come home. And so we all ran out to greet John. Oh, the peanuts went everywhere. We all ran to meet John, and John said, "Stay away from me. Don't come near me." And we were all stopped, and we didn't know what to think. And he said, "I've got lice all over my body. You can't touch it." And I can still remember him standing there in his raggedy clothes, uniform, and his worn-out shoes, and scratching. Well, Ma and Pa knew how to remedy that. Pretty soon they had the wash pot full of water out in the backyard and a fire built around it, and the lye soap was handy. And Ma, I didn't mention that before, Ma was a medicine woman. She knew all kinds of remedies for things, and I'm sure she knew a remedy for lice. So by and by, the water got hot, and he took the bath in the lye soap water, and cut his hair and shaved and put on some Ma's tonic for lice, And then we were able to hug him. And that was when we found out that the war was over. Now, I haven't told you what happened to my family. My family, Lemuel, my other brother who was fighting in the war, never came back to Georgia. He served over here in Drew County, Arkansas. And he fell in love with Arkansas. And also a girl named Maggie Cunningham. And so he wrote the family and he said, you all come to Arkansas. Oh, the Arkansas is a place to be. The woods are full of game. The streams are full of fish. And pigs are running around with forks in their backs. So, Ma and Pa and the unmarried children sold their holdings in Georgia and moved to Arkansas, to Drew County, Arkansas, 5 miles south of Monticello. And they established their home there. So when they heard that Nathan had died, though, they sent 2 of my brothers over to see me. And they came, and I was so glad to see them, and I found out about Ma and Pa and what all my little brothers and sisters had done. They'd grown up and married and everything, and I was so glad to see them. But the 3rd day that they were there, they said, now, late that afternoon, they said, now, Martha, you pack up all the clothes that you want. We've come to take you to Arkansas. I was just thrilled, but there was a cloud in the horizon. My in-laws, the Edwards family, they came in and they said, you're not going to go off and leave us. We'll help you with your children. You're not going to Arkansas. If you go to Arkansas, we will never see Nathan's children again. And that proved to be true because I had made up my mind to come to Arkansas. So that night I spent packing my clothes and everything I was going to bring to Arkansas in my trunk. And I came to my sewing machine and I started crying. And John was my oldest son. He was 10 years old. The other my 2 oldest children were girls. He began to cry. I began to cry, and he said, Mom, don't cry. He said, I can take that machine apart, and you can wrap it in the bedclothes, and when we get to Arkansas, I can put it back together again. And that's what he did. So when we got to Arkansas, sold my holdings in Georgia, when we got to Arkansas, they had found me a place to live and some land to buy, and I started sewing for people. Now, not everyone had a sewing machine, and I was kept pretty busy sewing for my family. Well, then, all my family, of course, they were glad to see me. They came in to help me. They gave me cows and chickens, and they taught my boys how to hunt and fish and catch the pigs running around with forks in their back. And so we got along there pretty good, and I was sewing, and I could sell butter and eggs. Well, you know, then I began to realize that my family, Ma and Pa, were getting old, and my family was sort of getting tired. They had families of their own. They didn't want to just come there and work, give all their time to me. And so gradually it dawned on me that I was fully in charge of raising those 7 children. It was root, hog, or die. I had the job to do. It was my job. And that's what I did. I got busy. I sewed for people. And then I mentioned that my mom was a medicine woman. She taught me the tricks of her trade, and she taught me how to be a midwife. And so then when my boys got older and my family got older, they were able to help me, and my daughters helped me with the sewing, and we somehow survived. And I had only one regret. My children didn't get as good an education as I would like for them to have. But you know what? They all grew up to be good citizens. And they gave me 28 beautiful grandchildren. And they were smart children, too. And they Many of them finished college. They got to go to college and get educated.